For centuries, the sea has hid more than just abyssal creatures or sunken ships. In its depths lie entire civilizations buried by the passage of time, erased from human memory. Some believe that these submerged cities are just myths: Atlantis, Lemuria, the sunken cities of ancient India. But what if one of them wasn't a legend at all? What if a lost civilization not only existed, but was protected by something darker and more incomprehensible? It all started with a whisper from the depths of the internet. A post on an alternative archaeology forum reported the discovery of unnatural structures detected at the bottom of the Timor Sea, between the northern coast of Australia and the island of East Timor. The message was brief, accompanied by a blurry image and partially erased coordinates. Some said it was a hoax, others said that the author disappeared days later. This clue fell into the hands of Dr. Helena Vasquez, a Brazilian archaeologist, known for exploring remote places with courage and skepticism. She had worked on forgotten temples in Burma, hidden tombs in the Andes, and even underwater excavations off the coast of Japan. But something about that post sparked an unusual feeling, as if she was being called. Helena was not one to be carried away by conspiracy theories. However, the image, even blurry, showed columns carved with symbols never seen in any known culture. The curvature of the shapes, the intricate details, all of it screamed authenticity. And most importantly, it seemed impossible for it to be there at the bottom of the ocean, without anyone ever having recorded it. Setting up an expedition to the site was a risky task. In addition to the funding, which she would get through a private donation from the Cade Foundation, interested in mysterious finds, she would need a reliable team. That's how she gathered 3 experts: Dr. Elias Hartmann, a German oceanographer specializing in marine geology and tectonic phenomena. Cold and methodical, he was driven by logic, but he had an obsession with pre-flood civilizations. Akira Sato, a Japanese underwater robotics engineer. Young, brilliant, and with a sharp sense of humor, she created the Triton X, an exploration drone capable of operating at extreme depths. Nilo Duarte, a Brazilian professional diver and underwater explorer, with dozens of rescue and exploration missions under his belt. He knew the sea like few others, but hid a silent fear of the unknown. The Kronos vessel set off from the port of Darwin, Australia, on a cloudy morning. The sea was calm, but the air carried a strange density, as if it knew what awaited below. On the second day of sailing, Helena couldn't sleep. The nightmares had started ever since she accepted the mission. She dreamed of dark, flooded corridors, songs in languages she had never studied, and eyes, disembodied eyes, just floating in the liquid shadows. Were they just the result of stress, or a warning? Upon reaching the indicated coordinates, the sonar detected something unusual. A perfectly symmetrical structure under 800 meters of water. An entire complex, aligned rectangles, columns, geometric shapes, and a larger central construction, almost like a flattened pyramid. It was impossible. There, in that stretch of ocean, there had never been any record of ancient human settlements. It was an unstable region, geologically young, in constant movement. But the images did not lie. The Triton X was launched. The ID mission was simple: approach, film, map the location, and return. Helena watched the screen with wide eyes. As the drone descended, the artificial light cut through the deep darkness like a knife cutting through silk. And then, they saw it. Monumental. Gates carved in metallic stone. A symbol repeated itself. 2 intertwined circles with spirals in the center. There were golden details, impossible at that depth, and inscriptions that seemed to move despite the static. But what shocked them most was not the architecture. It was what happened to the Triton X. As it approached the main gate, the camera flickered. The image became distorted. Akira tried to back away. The drone did not respond. Suddenly, the transmission stopped. In silence, everyone looked at each other. Hartmann was the first to speak. That was not a technical failure. Something down there interfered. Helena knew she couldn't back down. She had to see it with her own eyes. As crazy as it seemed, they were standing before the greatest archaeological find in modern history. And perhaps something that was never meant to be found. That night, the sea seemed darker, and from the bottom, where forgotten stones lay, the temple watched them back. It all started with a sound, a metallic echo recorded by a seismic monitoring station in the Mediterranean Sea, near the coast of Egypt. The sensors had detected something unusual, a rhythmic, repetitive pattern coming from a depth where, theoretically, there should be nothing but sedimentary rocks and ancient fossils. A French seismologist, Dr. Alain Moreau, watched the recording with intrigue. It didn't sound natural. It was as if some structure was vibrating, trying to speak. Discovery was sent to universities, but few paid attention. Then an old Egyptian fisherman named Hassan revealed that he had seen something strange years ago, after a storm. Blocks of stone under the water, with ancient inscriptions that seemed to look back at him. No one believed him. Until now, rumors spread, and within a few weeks an archaeological expedition was formed, sponsored by a private foundation. Among the group were Dr. Moreau, the young and determined Brazilian archaeologist Helena Vasconcelos, and the expert on lost antiquities, Professor Karim El-Sayed. They were about to descend into the waters of the unknown, but no one could have foreseen what they would be forced to awaken to. The research support vessel, called Al-Masir, set sail quietly from Alexandria. Officially, it was just another marine survey. In practice, each member knew they were searching for something older than the pyramids themselves. Helena, the archaeologist, carried with her an old journal she had inherited from her grandfather, also an archaeologist, that mentioned a temple beneath the world. She had never believed the text. But now, every line seemed to come to life. On deck, Karim was talking to an elite diver, Tariq al-Hakim, who would coordinate the first dives with submersible drones. Dr. Moreau was preparing his seismic instruments to record any new anomalies. That night, as the waves lapped gently against the ship's hull, the three gathered in the control room. The coordinates had been mapped. The search area was vast, but there was one spot in particular, the place where the metallic echo was loudest. A tense silence hung. Helena looked at the dark sea and said, "Maybe what we find down there will change everything we know about our origins." Karim replied seriously, "Or maybe we should never have come." At dawn, the RA-1 underwater drone was launched into the blue waters of the Mediterranean. With high-definition cameras, thermal sensors, and sonar, it slowly dove down to a depth of over 400 meters. The first few minutes showed nothing but sand, rocks, and the remains of ancient shipwrecks. But then something appeared, a pattern of symmetrical stones, too straight to be natural. The camera focused on a large block of stone with symbols carved in low relief, partially covered by coral. Helena's eyes widened. This is archaic Egyptian, pre-dynastic. Karim zoomed in on the screen. These symbols are older than anything we've ever seen. Dr. Moreau activated the sensors. A steady vibration emanated from the structures. The low-pitched sound began to pulse again, like a heartbeat. "Is this alive?" whispered Helena. It wasn't long before more structures emerged from the shadows. Broken columns, staircases covered in sediment, and something even larger in the background, a door carved with what looked like eyes. It was sealed, and behind it the unknown waited. A few hours after coming into contact with the ruins, the sea changed. Dark clouds appeared on the horizon, and the sea, which had been calm until then, began to churn violently. The weather equipment on board had not predicted the storm. It was as if it had come out of nowhere. "This is not natural," Karim said, holding onto a beam on the deck. Helena, trembling, felt something strange, a slight pain in the back of her neck, as if someone was whispering in her ear. "We have to stop operations," the captain shouted. The drone was hurriedly pulled back. The recordings were safe, but something else came with it. Trapped between the drone's arms was a miniature statue, a human figure with the head of a crocodile and eyes of black stone. Helena picked it up carefully. "Sobek," she murmured. Karim looked at her in astonishment. The god of dangerous waters. The storm lasted only an hour, but it was enough to leave a warning. That discovery would not be made without consequences. Gathered in the analysis room, the researchers examined the data. The images of the symbols revealed inscriptions never before seen. They seemed to be a mix between Proto-Egyptian and Mesopotamian symbols. Helena noticed a recurring sequence: 3 interconnected circles, followed by an undulating serpent. "This predates what we know as written history," she said. Karim confirmed. Maybe these people weren't even Egyptians, but something that preceded all civilizations. Dr. Moreau in turn compared the seismic pulses with ancient mythological tales. One legend in particular caught his attention: a sunken city called Netjeru, mentioned in forbidden papyri by ancient priests. "They say it was banished by the gods," Moreau whispered, "because it held knowledge that the world was not ready to receive." Helena held Sobek's artifact tightly, and we just unlocked the door. That night everyone dreamed, but they were no ordinary dreams. Helena found herself walking through stone corridors, lit by green torches. Voices whispered in forgotten languages. Karim saw himself sinking into an endless sea, while giant eyes watched him from the bottom. Dr. Moreau woke up sweating, with the word Netjeru engraved in his mind. At breakfast, silence reigned between them. "I dreamed about the temple," Helena said. "Me too," Karim replied. Dr. Moreau confirmed. "That's no coincidence. That place is calling us." The team decided to stop the excavations for 24 hours, but the feeling of being watched did not leave them. Even the sailors on the ship seemed restless. One of them said he had seen lights in the sea during the night. "Like blinking eyes," he said. Helena, now convinced that they were facing something beyond archaeology, decided that they could not retreat. They had to enter the temple, but only after they prepared themselves for whatever was waiting for them. The next morning, with the sea finally calm, the expedition leaders gathered. Helena came up with a bold plan: to personally descend to the submerged temple, wearing pressurized diving suits and a new support drone. "If it's calling us, we need to answer it." Karim hesitated. "What if it's a trap?" Dr. Moreau simply said, "We're past the point of retreat." The technical team began to assemble the equipment. A dive of this magnitude was risky, but Helena was determined. She believed that the temple was not just a building, it was a portal. The ship's captain warned, "From here on, there are no more guarantees." By afternoon, the suits were ready. The silence that preceded the operation was like the air before a lightning strike. As the 3 of them positioned themselves for the descent, Helena looked to the horizon and said, "If we never return, at least let the world know that the truth has always been underwater." As the first beams of light from the lanterns touched the temple's inner walls, something seemed to move, not physically, but in a deep vibration, as if the structure were breathing after centuries of silence. Miguel felt a chill as he looked. Up at the columns, where inscriptions in an unknown language glowed faintly blue, Lara, more skeptical, photographed each symbol while muttering theories about lost civilizations. But even she sensed a subtle unease, a pressure in the air, as if they had crossed an invisible boundary. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal of black stone, covered in dried seaweed and minerals hardened by time. As the group approached, a low rumble echoed off the walls. "It wasn't just the temple that woke," Lara said softly. "Something sensed us." They continued exploring the temple's side gallery and came across a wall carved with dozens of raised eyes. Each one seemed carved with eerie precision, as if it were actually watching. One of the eyes was cracked, revealing a cavity behind the stone. Lara inserted an endoscopic camera through the crack, revealing a secret room with giant sculptures of humanoid figures. Most disturbingly, one of the figures was an exact replica of Michael, with the same scar on his eyebrow and even the wedding ring on his finger. "This was done before we were even born," he muttered, pale. The French archaeologist Léon tried to rationalize. Maybe it's a coincidence, or a psychological projection. But everyone knew there was more to it. The temple didn't just seem alive, it knew who was invading it. In the next room, a colossal statue lay half buried in underwater debris. It depicted a creature with a humanoid body, but with tentacles for a beard and lidless eyes. When Lara shone the flashlight on the sculpture's face, Miguel recoiled. Its eyes were slightly moist. This is not possible, he muttered. Lara moved closer and realized that the material of the statue was different. It was not ordinary stone. It was something between fossilized coral and mineralized tissue. Suddenly, a muffled sound, like a heartbeat, filled the room. The lights flickered for a few seconds. When they came back on, the statue had turned its head slightly. The group froze. Here, at the bottom of the ocean, the idea that they were alone began to fade. Guided through a narrow corridor, they came to a circular chamber where sound seemed to echo unnaturally. Every word spoken was echoed in whispers that came from the walls. "This isn't ordinary reverberation," Lara said. "It's as if it had intent." In the center of the room was a stone disc with circular inscriptions. When Miguel touched the disc, a female, but in human voice, whispered his name. Everyone heard it. Tension grew. None of the signs indicated immediate danger, but there was a slow, growing terror, like being confronted by something that comprehends your mind. Lara stepped back and pulled Miguel by the hand. "We're not going to be able to understand this with logic," she said. "This temple speaks to us, literally." In the most hidden part of the temple, Lara found a sealed metal compartment. When she forced it open, inside was something completely unexpected. A sealed diary in Portuguese, with the name Paulo Azevedo on the cover. She recognized it immediately. It was the diary of her grandfather who had disappeared in 1957. Her hands shook as she opened it. The pages were wet but still legible. There he recounted the same discovery: the temple, the eyes, the whispers, and a clear warning. "Do not go beyond the mirror room. There, the temple sees you as you truly are." Miguel watched in silence. The family connection was now not just an emotional motivation. It was an ancestral calling. And something in that structure had been waiting for decades. They decided to follow the diary's warning. The mirror room was located deep within the structure, guarded by a corridor where the ceiling seemed to pulse. When they entered, they saw an immense mirror of polished black stone. When they looked into it, no one saw their own reflection. Each saw distorted versions of themselves. Miguel saw himself as an old man, with blind eyes and hands covered in symbols. Lara saw herself as a child, screaming in the water. Léon saw himself on his knees, with the temple collapsing in the background. The mirror did not show the present. It showed possible, perhaps inevitable, destinies. When they stepped back, crack appeared in the mirror's surface and a golden vapor began to slowly spread through the room. The crack grew. Lara, journal in hand, hesitated. "If we cross this line, we may not be able to return." Miguel, though terrified, felt a strange pull. "If we don't go, we'll live without answers. If we go, we may not return." Léon tried to communicate with the operations center on the surface, but the signal had disappeared. The temple was isolated, and now more alive than ever. The group looked at each other. They didn't know if they were facing a secret of humanity or something that should never be touched. But the decision was inevitable. They would go beyond the crack, and whatever awaited on the other side would change everything. The silence of the sunken temple seemed to contain all the voices of the past. Lara, Miguel, and Ahmed gathered at the edge of the final chamber, gazing at the newly discovered hieroglyphics. They were unlike anything they had ever seen. Circular symbols interconnected by lines that pulsed with a greenish glow, as if there was still living energy there. The place felt as if it were breathing. "This isn't just archaeology. It's like we're inside an ancient memory," Lara whispered in wonder. The inscriptions began to make sense when Ahmed linked the patterns to Sumerian records, an ancient language rarely found outside the Middle East. This discovery could rewrite entire chapters of human history, proving a connection between civilizations that had theoretically never met. But something still troubled them. Ever since they had activated the mechanism in the previous room, the water level had been slowly rising, as if the temple itself were reacting to their presence. Lara, determined, knew they were close to the limit, both physically and emotionally. And it was time to choose: preserve the knowledge or try to take it to the outside world. She looked at Miguel. "We need to decide now." The tension in the air was palpable. Miguel wanted to capture everything on video and get out of there before the temple became his tomb. Lara, however, hesitated. "If we leave now, all this will be destroyed by time, or worse, by the wrong hands," Ahmed reinforced. "These inscriptions may contain answers to the origins of ancient civilizations." The dilemma was real. Take the evidence and risk desecrating something sacred, or preserve the mystery and trust that the temple would survive on its own. Lara then had a radical idea. Activate the last mechanism and let the temple close, sealing. Its secret, but transmitting one last message to the world. An encrypted echo of the truth. They agreed, but they knew that would mean leaving the records behind. Miguel said goodbye to the cameras, and Ahmed made quick copies of the inscriptions in a wet but sturdy notebook. Lara then pressed the last stone marked with the spiral symbol. The temple began to tremble gently. The temple walls vibrated as if something colossal was waking up. The ceiling of the chamber began to slowly descend, pushing them toward the exit corridor. The water was rising faster now, forcing them to run. As they fled through the narrow corridors, they could hear the sound of ancient gears sealing the passages. The main entrance, where they had come from, was beginning to close with enormous sliding stones. It was a race against time, or against eternity. Lara looked back one last time, watching the glow of the room fade like a dying star. "We're leaving something bigger than us in there," she whispered, as they reached the diving tunnel. The last passage narrowed. They swam with all their might. Miguel was the last to emerge, his feet nearly trapped by the final slide of rocks. When they emerged, they saw the crater where the temple had once stood sink beneath the water. The temple now slept again, at peace but not forgotten. Outside, the world seemed to have stopped. The storm had passed, and only the sound of the sea filled the void. Lara sat on the wet sand, leafing through Ahmed's records. Each symbol seemed to carry the weight of entire generations. She began to understand. The civilizations that built the temple did not do so for power or worship, but as a warning. It was a time capsule built to resist oblivion. The temple did not hold treasures, but warnings. About technology, about destruction, about what happens when humans challenge the balance of nature. Ahmed explained that some of the patterns were reminiscent of cyclical astronomical events. It's possible that they went through something, like we have climate change, wars, maybe even pandemics. Lara realized that the temple was not just a sacred place. It was a mirror, a reflection of humanity that repeats itself over the millennia. And now, she had the responsibility to share this insight without turning the discovery into a spectacle. Back on the boat, as they headed away from the island, the sun was rising on the horizon. Miguel flew the drone to capture final images. The temple was completely submerged, with no trace of its entrance. Lara watched in silence. She felt transformed. This expedition had not brought fame or wealth, but something deeper, a change in consciousness. She decided not to reveal the exact location of the temple, protecting it from relic hunters. Ahmed's records were digitized, encrypted, and sent to specific universities under the name Project Archet. The group knew that even without physical evidence, their words could sow doubt and spark curiosity in anyone willing to listen. Because sometimes, the most important thing is not to prove that something exists, but to inspire the world to seek it out. Months later, a news story went viral. An anonymous article titled "The Sunken Temple That No One Should Have Found" was circulating around the world. Experts, skeptics, and curious people debated whether it was a modern legend or the beginning of a new era of discovery. Lara stayed out of the spotlight, but she quietly followed the discussions. Some symbols had already been deciphered by archaeologists and were being compared to submerged megalithic structures in Japan and Cuba. The project gained quiet notoriety, with academic forums flooded with theories. Ahmed gave discreet lectures on archaeological ethics, and Miguel had become a respected documentary filmmaker. The adventure had left its mark on each of them, marks that never fade. The world never knew their names. But the idea that there are stories buried beyond time was now part of the collective consciousness, and perhaps that was the most important thing. Lara returned alone to the coast months later. The sea was calm. She sat on the same rock where she had rested after her escape. There she left a capsule, not with technology, but with words. A diary summarizing everything they had experienced, everything they had learned. To whoever finds this, knowledge should be shared, but with respect. Not everything needs to be unearthed. Some truths should be felt, not exposed. The temple slept beneath the waters, but its presence could be felt. The sea there was denser, calmer, as if time had made a pact with that place. Lara returned to the world with the certainty that there were more temples, more secrets, and that the planet holds scars and teachings for those who dare to listen. And so not only a journey ended, but the birth of a new purpose: to honor the past, protect the present, and guide the future.